with a very important topic called security awareness training, an important part of any defense in-depth program for cybersecurity. So why don't we get started? Cloud security risk. You know, it seems these days that everything just about is being migrated to the cloud. Digital transformation is a topic at the top of mind of many CIOs and chief executives in the industry. It's the promise of moving things to the cloud to gain leverage and services that are ubiquitous and to save, quite frankly, cost. The promise of cloud is an important IT concept, one that has, unfortunately, its own security risks, and these are some of them, right? So one of the most important security risks that, in doing the research for this discussion, was that we're seeing many misconfigured cloud storage configurations that have produced over 200 breaches, exposing more than 30 billion records. This is an important factor and one that needs to be considered when we're putting sensitive data in the cloud. The notion of Google Cloud and Azure and AWS by Amazon, those are terrific platforms, but we need to ensure who has access to those platforms, what kind of data they're accessing, and specifically, is it secured? Other areas of risk include an understanding on where your data is and visibility and control for that information. It's nice to be in the cloud, but it's equally important to understand that you have a single pane of glass, preferably, to see the security controls associated with your services that are in the cloud. Authentication is always an important factor when having information in the cloud and user access. These days, application programming interfaces are equally important. We see that APIs connect to many subordinate applications and products for our cloud offerings. So it's important to have good encryption and authentication within our API structures. And then finally, when you're looking at terminating a contract, and I've seen this in my career, where the contract needs to detail data deletion and to ensure that there are no digital crumbs, if you will, being left behind. That needs to be clearly spelled out, and it needs to align with NIST 800-88 practices for securely wiping information from storage. And it's always important when dealing with cloud applications to do a risk assessment, which here at CCSI, we're happy to do so to understand any risk associated with applications. So the second item I'd like to talk about is ransomware attacks, one of the most important cyber threats that are out there, particularly continuing to see campaigns, particularly in healthcare. Healthcare records are the most expensive and important records because of their sensitivity and their ability to perpetrate fraud with. So in the healthcare space, the biotech space, you'll see this take place and be a very important part of defenses there. CCSI offers a really nice prevention checklist, a ransomware prevention checklist located on our site. I would encourage all who are on this webinar today to take a look at it. It really details the things that one should be doing as a cybersecurity practitioner to prevent against ransomware attacks. This is not a complete list here, but many here, I believe, are the most important items to consider and focus on. First and foremost, you want to use clearly secure networks, preferably a VPN, utilizing multi-factor authentication, and also offering and installing and utilizing RBAC, which is role-based access control, preferably under the notion of least privilege, so that people are only receiving the access that they need to do their job function. It's also advisable by the NSA to restrict vulnerable internet-facing services, and we can think about those Microsoft services that have been in the news regarding vulnerabilities such as RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, and server message blocks, which were part of the Eternal Blue vulnerabilities most recently. These should not be exposed to the internet. It has been my experience that RDP can be tunneled through SSH, but most notably, you need to be very careful with these two Microsoft services. It's always important to use anti-ransomware endpoint software. CCSI is involved in offering two very good products, Fortinet EDR and Cylance. Later on, we'll talk about the Threat Protect product that CCSI uses, which is a SIM product, Security Incident and Event Management Platform. To contain these types of breaches or types of attacks, it's advisable to use private VLANs, restricting communication only in these spaces so that you can't jump to another part of your enterprise network. If you did need to respond to a breach and needed to implement or enact your BCP program, your business continuity program, it's important to have and maintain backups in a secure offline location. And these should be regularly tested. Another important risk factor, and we'll talk more about this later in our security awareness segment, exercise good judgment when it comes to email. Don't click on links that are not or are suspicious, if you will. You should really be careful with regard to your email system and trusting those links that are coming in. And finally, and I alluded to this earlier, any defense in-depth program requires implementation of an employee security awareness program. We'll get into detail with that later on. One of the most promising technologies that we see in cybersecurity today, and quite frankly in IT, is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Machine learning is a subsector of artificial intelligence. The promise of these technologies is really significant. We can leverage this technology as an extension of our security operations center, if you will, for intelligent defense technology. The promise here is that since this machine learning methodology relies on vast amounts of data, we can train the algorithms to actually focus on those types of risks and attacks that we would like to alert on and triage. It comes with a great deal of use cases and benefits, and one of them it would be endpoint detection and response, and again, the security incident and event management platforms, both of which that CCSI offers. And so here what we try to do, and we do it successfully, is take in that data from a myriad of cyber systems. You can think about your endpoint detection, your secure email gateways, and other associated services. Take those logs, feed them into a SIM, and then have a machine learning product actually through pattern recognition understand what's important to alert on, what's important to triage. Humans are good at understanding causation and figuring out why something happened, but certainly computers are much better at raw computing power and understanding what's important. And that's the promise and benefit of artificial intelligence. And so the technology also prevents against what we call alert fatigue. Analysts, you can imagine if they're reviewing thousands of alerts, over time, their efficiency can diminish as well as their effectiveness. With this tool and technology, we prevent against that. You can also provide for richer details into the anomalous activity of the alerts that you're seeing, all with great benefit to the overall cause of understanding the attacks that are coming into your enterprise. I would add, though, that machine learning and artificial intelligence are not all things to all people. They're not a panacea. We still need human interaction. Security operations staff will always be recognized and necessary part of understanding a root cause analysis. That's what I was referring to earlier about causation. An important part of any understanding of why an attack occurred and ultimately to prevent it in the future. IBM did a recent study about these types of automation technologies, and they mentioned and understood from their surveying that in implementing and deploying these types of technologies reduced the average cost of a data breach by 60%. So there's certainly an incentive to research these, do a proof of concept, and deploy them and utilize them. And CCSI has been at the forefront of these types of activities from the beginning. Next area I want to focus on is remote work, the threats associated, and even countermeasures to be provided against them. So I think we can all say through the pandemic that the distributed workforce and remote work is here to stay in some form or fashion. I think that many companies see it now as an extension of their workforce, as an extension of how they do business, but it doesn't come without risk. And so we'll talk about that in a moment, but in researching this, 70% of organizations expect at least a third of their remote workforce to continue 18 months subsequent to going into the office again. So I thought that was quite significant. And it speaks to how the landscape has changed in our workforce today. I talked about digital transformation projects, and more you're seeing that with the ability of the remote workforce. But it does come with threats, and it does come with risk. And what we've seen is, threats associated with nation-state activity. Most recently, and we'll talk in depth about this later on, the SolarWinds and FireEye security breaches, and the industries associated with these types of risks. I think it's fairly evident, right? Those innovation industries such as biotech, pharmaceutical, security firms, and the IT supply chain, which is vital to enterprise here in the United States. Companies are also evaluating and investing in several countermeasures to these risks, though. And so the promise of zero trust, where we don't trust, we need to verify that you are who you say you are before we let you onto our network or have access to our resources. That function is typically done by multi-factor authentication. And so these types of zero trust opportunities and process and procedure allow for a more secure network enterprise, one that I think you'll be seeing more and more focus on as we move here into this year and next. Another area I wanted to focus on, as I mentioned earlier, is the recent SolarWinds Orion software attack, as reported by FireEye. This was a state-sponsored attack, and one that was quite damaging to the overall IT supply chain. It was perpetrated by what many believe to be Russian actors. And many believe that this was taking place from many months prior, some 8 months prior, that they were in the SolarWinds ecosystem, if you will. And so it was done by compromising a very important DLL, which is an update to the overall SolarWinds Orion software. Interestingly enough, there was a digital certificate that was actually compromised. No word on how exactly that was done. It'll be interesting to find out that detail. But the password of the application and protocol that was utilized to do the compromise was reportedly a very simple one, SolarWinds 123. So it speaks to the notion of you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so passwords have been a problem for some time, but particularly so here. And so this particular malware or threat infection was utilized as a backdoor via HTTP to command and control servers, and I've listed the domain here with brackets so that no one can inadvertently click on it. avsmcloud.com. So if you see this or have noted in your DNS strings, that would be considered an indicator of compromise. And so apparently the Trojan infection is dormant for a number of weeks and then retrieves and executes a slew of commands, not the least of which is to reboot machines and disable system services. So it was quite damaging, and a lot of work went into this to remediate those who were infected. And quite frankly, at least 10 government agencies were infected, as well as much of the IT supply chain that utilized the SolarWinds software. And for those who are not familiar with SolarWinds, it's a software that basically runs the IT shop of an enterprise. It does monitoring, it does triage, it does change management, so on and so forth. There's quite a few components in there to run an enterprise IT shop. So the injected malware, getting back to the infection, actually had an obfuscation component where it had masqueraded as the overall Orion protocol, where it stored its reconnaissance and wreaked all kinds of havoc with legitimate SolarWinds activity. This was a well thought out attack, well sponsored, and it believed to be state sponsored as well. So more to come, I'm sure, on this, but one that would require additional focus as we move forward here and develop in this new year. Some of the areas to provide for quick response as part of an incident response to the attack would be, first and foremost, quite simply, understanding the vulnerable versions that may be run in your enterprise. As I mentioned earlier, an indicator of compromise would be the attack domain, avsmcloud.com. And as just general information and a plan of attack for incident response, you want to be able to check for unusual account activity and systems activity, understand that there haven't been any changes that you would not expect to important service accounts, particularly on the service admin account behavior. Or what does that look like for devices that were using SolarWinds, right? And first and foremost, access control and authentication are our key focus here. So you should really scrutinize your AD changes. Take a look at what, if any, elevations of privilege have occurred within your AD structure. Those are all important areas to consider when understanding if you've been exposed to this infection. So the final area I wanted to focus on as part of trends for this year is security awareness training. And so a really important part of security awareness in a defense in depth program is to implement this type of program, a security awareness training program. So I'll give you an example. Recently, we conducted a pen test with a CCSI customer. And we noted that their business, their physical business, was under construction. So what we did is we crafted a special email, a phishing email, if you will, to test as part of our pen test process, if we could phish certain folks within their organization. And the CEO was well aware of what we were doing and on board with it. And so we sent out these series of emails. And we promised them the following. We said that, time is of the essence on a first come, first served basis. Because we're under construction, those who sign up will be granted the opportunity to work from home immediately. But it's on a first come, first served basis. So lo and behold, people clicked, many people clicked, and more people clicked. Ultimately, over 70% of the company clicked on this phishing email, and the CEO asked us to stop and to conclude our testing. And so at that point, we illustrated quite clearly the importance of a security awareness training, and we were able to, not only illustrate, but deliver that service. So it is an important investment. It needs to take place. It's part of an overall defense in depth posture that enterprises should engage in to have a proper cybersecurity posture. And it comes along with, educating your workforce to understand what not to do, right? Data breaches are incredibly financially cost basis, as well as they perpetrate reputational damage. And ultimately, they could be catastrophic, right, to an organization. And so the understanding on the investment is that we want to improve human behavior. We want to reduce that risk. One of the key things in doing the research is what I found is that up to 90% of malicious breaches are due to social engineering. So it truly is an important risk factor to provide countermeasures for. And the way to do that is to educate the workforce. So in saying that, what part of the programs should we implement and what features should we implement to have a robust security awareness and training program? So first and foremost, we need to provide hands-on experience for our users. We need to give them the sense on what a phishing email is and why it's important to be wary of them, right? And so what does a typical phishing email look like? Why are certain things about one email different than another? So here at CCSI, we offer a couple of different security awareness training products. KnowBe4 is one, Fortinet is another, where we train our users with regard to what to look for and what not to click on. We track them by way of metrics and reporting. And another part of the program features that are really important is to recognize those folks who are doing well at it, those departments internally that are doing well at it. And so it's important for engagement, not only on the individual level, but on the corporation or organization level as well. Senior management also plays a part in this. Their support is much needed for continuing such a program. So I think right now we all know that hackers run 24/7. They don't sleep, but neither do we, right? So here at CCSI, we offer a product called Threat Protect, which is a 24/7 monitoring solution that we offer here in our Suffolk County location, where at any time, if there is an attack, you can reach somebody here and get an immediate response. You won't be calling offshore. It'll actually go into our folks here in the Suffolk location. CCSI's Threat Protect offers adaptive behavioral analysis. It's part of that machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies that I mentioned earlier. It evaluates the changing network conditions and instantly can identify phases of a cyber attack. And so it allows for, the removal or elimination potentially of threat hunting by isolating attacks, and just makes an overall efficient type of response to threats and attacks. It does so by prioritizing and scoring detected threats, and it allows for the explanation of key assets targeted for attack as well. And so how do we do this, right? So we separate it by three areas, and we separate it by people, process, and technology. Straightforward ITIL types of IT processes, where the people part of it are doing the monitoring, they're doing the runbook procedures, they're following up with incident management procedures, and they're storing events for further forensic analysis, because it's part of that causation component that I mentioned earlier. We want to understand ultimately a root cause if there is an attack that takes place. The process part of it is straightforward. We're looking to baseline our data sources to reduce noise. We don't want so many alerts that we're chasing alerts and not chasing attacks per se. We want to eliminate false positives. So we consistently and confidently update our platforms here to have regular updates and upgrades. And we apply, as I mentioned earlier, correlation rules for the accurate identification of potential threats. We do so on the foundation of technology. The third part of this, the people process, is the technology, right? And so we offer a SIM product which has all of these log detection technologies fed into it. So from a single pane of glass, we can correlate all of that information and understand what's noteworthy, what isn't. Vulnerability management, network security, secure email, endpoint detection, all are fed in. And so these are really important for us to understand from a security operations center perspective. What do we want to act on and what needs to be acted on? And we do so from our SIM platform. And so here at CCSI, we offer a myriad of cybersecurity services and products. It's quite thorough. We like to use the security wheel, the CCSI security wheel depicted here, where we look at, as mentioned earlier, security awareness products all the way to our managed SOC. Come talk to us. We're happy to do so. We're happy to engage you in conversation. We're happy to look at any gaps you may have through risk assessment in your security related endeavors. And so we really believe that we can help you in your cybersecurity journey. So with that, that concludes today's discussion and the cybersecurity trends for 2021. we'll take questions.
Thank you, Rob. That was very informative. And I do have a few questions from the audience.
Excellent.
Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. Question number one. What do you consider the largest threat for data security?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's absolutely. I would say the biggest threat out there for a data breach would be phishing attacks, as I mentioned earlier. You know, it's interesting. We all think that we have to have these sophisticated, attacks that take place. But the easiest way to get into a network is through human endeavor, right? Social engineering. As I mentioned earlier with the example, that's really an area that companies can really see benefit from, is understanding the weaknesses associated with their social engineering.
Thank you. Next, in your opinion, what is the most significant network vulnerability?
Well, it's another simple one, I think, right? We oftentimes think about, carefully crafted packets to get into and thwart network defenses. But I think that it's good IT hygiene, right? It's patching. There are vulnerabilities in systems. Oftentimes they're being exploited because there are existing patches that have not been applied. And look, we all understand the necessity of our IT systems. They run our businesses, and we need to go through a testing phase before we promote a patch system to production. But in many cases, it's been shown that the lack of patching has been an exposure and could have prevented cyber attacks.
Thank you. Before I go to the next question, Rob, I just wanted to say that if anyone who joined a little bit late, feel free, if you have some questions, just put it into the group chat. Next question. What steps can be taken to better protect and defend the IT supply chain?
Well, I think, and there's been some chatter about this by CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a federal agency. I don't know if everyone's familiar, but in the electrical space, there's a consortium called UL, or Underwriters Laboratory, and they certify best practices and devices. There's been some chatter about doing so in the IT supply chain for offering updates to software. And I think that that's something that's probably going to be considered as we move forward here, because it was very damaging, the SolarWinds attack, to the overall supply chain. And with IoT devices being more and more important as we move forward, and their updates that are required as well, and also being relied upon for machine learning and artificial intelligence, IoT sensors, I think there's also going to be needed that certification process, and we'll probably hear more and more about that as we develop into this year and next.
Thank you, Rob. At this point, I'd like to thank everyone for your time today, joining us. As follow-up, your account managers and myself will be following up to discuss next steps. And if anyone has further questions or require additional information on anything that Rob had mentioned today, demonstration on the Threat Protect solution, you can reach out to myself, Joe Olasino, or Rob Villano. I also wanted to make a note that a survey will be sent to everyone, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. And once CCSI receives your survey, you'll receive a complimentary ransomware checklist. And all of the people who attended today, CCSI does do a lot of these from time to time on different subject matter, and we'll keep you all informed on those dates, and we'd love to have you join us once again. At this time, again, thank you, and have a great day.